Welcome. Welcome to the All In Learning Series session. We're so thrilled to have you today on this very, very important topic. We clearly think there is a need to have this discussion given the outpouring of people that registered and signed up. So thank you very much for joining. Today, we're going to be discussing the federal actions on the U.S. Department of Education, especially looking at the implications for adult English learners, which make up a significant percentage of our learners in the federally funded programs. So as it stands, nearly 1 in 10 working age adults in the US is a multilingual learner of English. And access to high quality education is super important for this community in terms of accelerating immigrant skill development, integration in the US workforce and community. And really the focus for our next 2 learning sessions is on the policies, practices, and also the incredible learning opportunities that are available for supporting immigrant and refugees in our community. So thank you again for joining us. I'm Sarah Casisio. I am the director of All In, which is the Adult Literacy and Learning Impact Network. I'll share a little bit more about what that is, but first I'm going to pass it over to our lead presenter, Jeff Hutchison from TESOL. Jeff?
All right. Well, Sarah, thank you very much. I appreciate your convening us, especially now in this season that we experience annually in terms of appropriations at the federal level, but also just how we are right now in the policies impacting education across the United States. And thank you very much, Sarah, to the work of All In. And what it's doing to advance adult literacy. And so just very much appreciate that and appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am Jeff Hutchison, as it shows there on the screen. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy at TESOL International Association. I myself am a longtime TESOLer. Matter of fact, it goes way back into the well, never mind. But it goes way back that I've been with TESOL. I've had the opportunity to work with TESOL in the policy arena, both outside as a member and also as colleague and peer associations, and now inside working with the wonderful board we have and wonderful staff we have and our members from across the globe. If you're not familiar with TESOL International Association, we are a professional association focused upon advancing English language teaching across the globe, with the majority of our membership here in the United States. So very, very pleased to be here, and thank you, Sarah. I'm sorry. And joining me, joining me is Kiara Valentine. And Kiara, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Kiara is joining us. Actually, I'm going to let you introduce. I'll be quiet in just a minute. But it's one of the great things about the role that I have is that we have the opportunity to work alongside several peer and adjacent organizations and associations focused at all levels of supporting the educators, supporting learners, and in whatever level they are. And Kiara comes from a wonderful organization called, well, I'll let you introduce the organization, but I've had opportunity to come alongside and work with her and several of her colleagues over the past few years. So very, very honored to have Kiara with us. Kiara, please.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much. Thank you to Sarah and All In and to TESOL for extending the invitation. As Jeff said, my name is Kiara Ballantyne. I'm Vice President for Programs and Development with the Center for Applied Linguistics. We're a nonprofit here based here in Washington, D.C. Our mission is access, equity, and mutual understanding for multilingual people all around the world. We're active in K through 12 ESL. We're active in adult ESL. We're active in assessment activities and many other activities here in the United States and abroad with regard to ensuring that there is access to education for multilingual learners and to ensuring that there's equity for that group of students, be they K through 12 students, all the way from kindergarten to our adult learners. And so I am particularly pleased to be here talking to a group of adult educators. My own ESL background is in vocational ESL right here in Washington, D.C., working with some union apprenticeship programs and some community college programs here in D.C., where I had the privilege of working with quite a number of folks who were newcomers here to the United States, coming in from other places and learning English. I'm an immigrant myself. I want to just say a shout out to whoever's name flashed up very quickly in the chat that I could not see your name, but who is calling in from Glasgow, Scotland, which is my hometown. But a long time gone from there.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kier, next time we'll just convene this panel over in Glasgow. That would be
Lovely.
Um, and I also want to point out that we have another panelist joining us today, and we are honored and privileged to have with us a staffer from Senator Reed's office, Moria Linehan. And Moria, I'll let you introduce yourself here, but just what an honor it is to have you with us, a longtime supporter out of that office, as well as you yourself, a longtime supporter of English language teaching and English learners at all levels. So Moria, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, hold on. Let me see where my. No, it's on my. Excuse me for the problems with my headset. Thank you very much for inviting me. I am. I've been pleased to work on these issues for more years than I care to admit to, perhaps. But I'm Senator Reed is the co-chair of the Adult Literacy Caucus with Senator Collins. He's worked with Senator Young on adult education legislation, bills to reauthorize the adult education programs in Title II and strengthen the connections for adult education throughout the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. He has also worked on strengthening research in adult education, and is currently leading the funding letter. And I was trying to see on my computer, because we are in the midst of what we call appropriation season here, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, and shoring up support for adult education programs. And just a little bit more about me, in a previous career, I worked for a firm that represented TESOL, and I also served on CEA, and the accreditation body for intensive English programs. I was a public member, and so I have a long and deep interest in the field. My husband and my mother-in-law were English learners and went through ESL and went through civics education, and both got naturalized, are both naturalized citizens. So I know the power of what you do, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So as you can see, we have an incredible panel of expert leaders on this topic. I'm going to give a very, very brief overview, because many of you have heard this before, of what All In is and what we're trying to do here. And then I'll pass it over to Jeff to walk us through this incredible discussion. So just kind of moving ahead, All In is a collective impact network of 11 national organizations that are all aligning on how we can advance adult literacy together. We really are thinking about ways that we can support and expand access to literacy in ways that no one organization can do alone. And so TESOL International Association is one of our members, as well as so many other fantastic leaders in the space, including COABE, World Education, Pro Literacy. And so very excited to keep up this collaborative work. Our work is guided by the National Action Plan for Adult Literacy, which was put together in collaboration with over 100 experts in the field, including educators, researchers, state directors, and adult learners themselves. So if you haven't checked out the plan, we will include it in the follow-up notes, but supporting English learning is a critical part of this work. I'm not going to give all the facts here, but just a few key things to take away. Over 58 million adults have foundational literacy needs, and 1 in 10 US workers need English skills. We do not want to conflate English learning with foundational reading, as those are not exactly the same things, but there is some overlap with many of our immigrant learners that come in at or below a literacy skill level in their home language and sometimes in English as well. So this is a critical piece of our population. And we know English opens the doors to so many opportunities in the US. We'll hear from NGen in our next session, and we'll drop that in the chat toward the end, about the kinds of upskilling that can be really profoundly helpful for new immigrant learners. And I also have a background in bilingual education and ESL, so I'm ready to get to this convo myself. As I mentioned, over 28% of adults in the US are struggling with foundational skills and only able to read short, simple sentences, but fewer than 10% of those individuals are currently enrolled in services. So just something to think about. There are so many access points that we need to examine and consider to support people with foundational needs. Investing in adult literacy, and I would add English learning to some of this, has the potential to impact our healthcare system, our skilled workforce. Absolutely, there's a connection there between closing the reading and digital skills divide and increasing pay, stronger economies at the local level, but also at the national level. And we know national security, civic engagement, as Moira mentioned, civics education, language learning. These are interconnected parts of this work that we want to think about. So just thinking about that. And then with that, if you're interested in learning more, please sign up for our regular updates. I'll drop into the chat our newsletter that dropped today, and you can learn more. And with that, I'll pass it over back to Jeff to talk about this session today.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Just very quickly before you put the slides down, just for the benefit of those joining us, this is what we intend to touch upon in a panel discussion today. We're just going to talk, set a little context, and thank you, Sarah, for setting the larger context for adult literacy, adult education here in the United States. And then I think the bulk of I know the bulk of the discussion will get into kind of what has been happening over the past few months in terms of impact for the adult education community, specifically with English learners, adult English learners, from executive orders to rescissions of memos, department cuts, etc. Talk a little bit about some of the funding cuts that have impacted adult education as well. Well, specifically, we'll focus again upon English language teaching and English learners. And then the big one, as Maura had pointed out, that we are in the midst of appropriations for fiscal year 2026. Put a little bit of that in context, what it matters, and then we'd love to end this with what you can do and how you can take action to support adult education and adult and family literacy, especially for English learners at the federal level. So we're just going to have a round robin panel discussion here, but the first one, really, I think it's a good way to segue off of what Sarah had introduced us with is why does this matter? What is the context when we're talking about adult education, adult literacy, and putting in the context for English learners? When we look at the total number of individuals in the United States that are classified, and I use this classification because this is what the government uses, limited English proficient. You can look at the stats, and best estimates are we're looking at about 20 million foreign-born and U.S.-born, not just specifically foreign-born, but foreign-born and U.S.-born individuals in the country that are classified as limited English proficient. We do know that adults that are foreign-born adults, foreign-born adults, stats on those are about 4 to 5 million. I think I have that right. I'll have to get that back out, but that was from the Migration Policy Institute. That have less than a GED. And then we have seen the stat for those in our public education, K through 12, looking at a little over 5 million English learners there. But to set the context a little bit further, we have this category of foreign-born and U.S.-born. And right now, unfortunately, in the United States, when we talk about English learners, that in the public domain at times will get conflated with someone who might be unlawfully present in the United States. We tend to use the word immigrant sometimes pejoratively in our public discourse, and I think to our detriment in doing that. But when we look at English learners, if you look down at the data from the Migration Policy Institute, you can see that over half of those individuals that are classified that are classified as limited English proficient are actually either born here in the United States or are naturalized citizens. There's no information that we have on the lawful status of the others, but right off the bat, you can tell that conflating English learners in this public discourse of undocumented or unlawful is not really helpful in the process. And then another aspect, when we drill down even further to what the federal government supports through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, specifically Title II, the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, is that over half of the participants from the most recent, well, actually the past 2 years from the National Reporting System, shows that over half are English, over half of the adult participants in these federally funded programs are English learners. So we put that in the context of what Sarah outlined in terms of need. You can see that there is a great need when it comes to our to individuals that need English proficiency to begin to navigate and access and assimilate into the community, into the economy and the workforce, and just the society and education around them. So that's I wanted to set that a little bit for you of a context of why this matters and the impact that adult education has here in the United States. And Kira, more, I'll open it up to you before we move into a little bit more detail from your perspective. Maury, I'll start with you. I know that you have opportunity to hear from constituents, especially there in Rhode Island. What are some of the things that you are hearing about why this matters, why adult education matters, especially for English learners?
Right. Well, so it's it's critically important. If you look at what our workforce, let's start with the workforce perspective. If you look at what our workforce needs are, um, you need foundational skills in literacy, numeracy, digital literacy to be competitive, to be able to have a good family sustaining job. And employers need people with these foundational skills. And when you don't have, when you don't have them, when you need to work on them, um, you need to have the supports, you need to have the programs. They need to be flexible because people are working while they're trying to build their skills. And we just cannot fuel our economy by writing off such a high percentage of folks who don't have the foundational skills to really advance. We need it in terms of when we look at our younger people and we see what's been happening with our literacy scores, they're going down.
Mhm.
Um, and if you don't have some multi-generational approaches, you're not really going to make the headway that you want to see. Families are critical to early literacy development. They're critical to academic achievement across the lifespan. So to the extent that you can support families and the adults in the families with their learning and their foundational skills, you're going to be helping the young people, the children succeed. So we take great exception to the administration's skinny budget that would eliminate the Title II adult education program, saying that they're going to give education back to the states, which the states really already have it, and that they are they don't need adult education because the states are going to take care of the K-12 education, and therefore you won't have any adults in need of adult education at some point in the future. And it just belies how dynamic our system is. We bring, plus you have adults now who need skills development. You have new people coming in that you want to integrate and give them the English language skills and other skills that they need to be able to fully participate in our communities. So there's always going to be a need for adult education
Yes.
and lifelong learning. And so, those are just some of the reasons why it's so important that we focus on this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maureen. I probably said it at the beginning, but I just want to give a shout out again to Senator Reed. The work being done out of Rhode Island, in this arena, in this space, is very much appreciated. So thank you, and thank you for highlighting the multi-generational aspects, and also a little bit of the, shall we say, defects that we see in the skinny budget when it comes to adult education. We'll extrapolate a little bit more as we go to get into that. Kira, what do you see from your view?
I think that as I see all of this unfolding on the federal stage, the thing that I keep coming back to is, the United States is fundamentally, we are a nation of immigrants, right? We can't pretend that we're not. We can't make that go away just by putting into place some of these really sort of nasty policies and practices that we see. We're a nation of immigrants. We have the opportunity to fulfill the promise of what that means. And one of the things that helps us fulfill that promise is encouraging multilingualism. And, English is our de facto language of communication. And so, ensuring that everybody who is here is welcomed by that access and opportunity for public education that enables everyone to be full participants in our society. I mean, that is the bottom line for me. I think for a lot of us is saying, you're welcome here. And we're going to make sure that folks have opportunities. And those opportunities for newcomers into the United States translate into opportunity and access for all of us. We all benefit. We all benefit when we are here in a place where we have the talents of people who are coming from all around the world. We all benefit when we have an educated workforce and a multilingual workforce. And that means that folks are able to use English and also the language that they came into this country with. We benefit in schools when families have the opportunity to understand what's going on in their kids' schooling in English. And we benefit in our healthcare systems when folks can access healthcare, when they're afforded the language education that they need to fully access that healthcare. I mean, just all across our society, we see benefits when we welcome people who are coming here as immigrants and we say, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to say you get the opportunity to access education in English, language proficiency, to access education that you might not have had in the places that you've come from, because you've got something to contribute to our society and we want to make sure you have the full opportunity to flourish and to contribute to that. So, that then translates into, that's a big idea, right? That translates into those programs in communities and localities that are making sure that folks are right at the level where they need to be learning, that they're provided with classes that meet their needs, that there are educators who are trained and appropriately compensated to deliver those programs, and that whole suite of programs that we need to have in place just to say, this is the place we are, and this is who we are, and this is what we're going to do to support our immigrant neighbors.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you for putting in the context of messaging what it communicates. I very much appreciate um, the the need and the desire to say you are welcome here. And that, I've just used that phrase, but that is a phrase that was used a few years ago during another iteration of the administration, especially in the higher education community when it was impacting international students. But to have that message, you're welcome. And I think what we're seeing is a little bit counter to that right now in the public narrative. And that kind of really sits into one of the first things that, off the bat, that we saw from the federal branch, the executive branch, that rescinded a memo on protected areas. Opening up as part of really the push of I think, well, to use their phrase, mass deportations, and targeting those that were unlawfully present. It opened up, or rescinded, excuse me, not opened up, rescinded a memo in which ICE enforcement could come in without exigent circumstances for action, arrest, and activity in protected areas. It wasn't just schools. You think think of K through 12, we think of higher ed, but in the adult ed, those schools can be in a variety of contexts. Could be in libraries, could be in churches. Churches, of course, it's protected areas as well, but it's just opened up that. Now, the reality is that the activity in that area, I think, at least to my knowledge, has been minimal, almost non-existent. However, what has been prevalent is the effect, the chill factor, if you will. The reports that we hear at TESOL, I know in some of our other colleague associations, reports of especially programs serving adult ed communities at the ESL. If there's a pre-K through 12 community that has a large number of English learners, in which people are not showing up. And it takes away that really schools should be the safest place, for our learners, whatever level they are. So that was one of the first things that came out, and I think really started the ball rolling, in which people had a little bit of fear factor. And you said, well, Jeff, it's only if they're unlawfully present. Well, if we look at the numbers, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's well into the millions of in which children are part of mixed status families. And when you look at it in that context, you might have a child that could be a U.S. citizen. You might have a family member that's perhaps lawfully present, but maybe at some point they had some blot upon their record that could cause them into jeopardy. So you have this fear that is instilled within that. I think that was one of the first things, at least that we saw at TESOL. We immediately put together resources to help with schools, as well as many of our peer organizations with that at all levels. To what do you do if ICE comes calling? What know your rights campaigns, making sure that people had that information. That was the first thing we saw, and then to me, one that really hit upon what you just spoke about, Kiera, was the executive order establishing or designating, I believe was the phrase, English as the official language. Um, I don't want to speak. I don't want to be the first one to speak about this, but I want to open it up to both Kiera and Maria. If you had any thoughts when that came out, what did that communicate? What were some of the thoughts that went through, maybe not just you yourself, but as your organization, as the office of, how are we serving our English learner population if we are establishing this and de-emphasizing bilingualism and multilingualism?
So I'm happy to start. I guess I would first say that this move to declare English as the official language of the United States goes way back, as many of you who've probably been around a while know. And I think no one denies that to be able to really fully participate in the United States, in our communities, in our society, you need to be proficient in English to be able to advance in your career, maximize your potential. English is critical to be, a fully informed citizen. You need English. But that is not to say that it's English only. That our nation has a long history of bilingual communities. I'm originally from Ohio, and they had German schools in Ohio. Um, and and so I think um, I think there's a mistaken idea that people are not learning English and don't want to learn English. If you just look at immigrant families generally, maybe the first generation struggles with the English language, but their children will speak English to one another. It's just you know that's just how things develop, and so we need to be focusing on providing resources for people to learn English. We need to honor the multilingualism that's been part of this country from the very beginning. And we need to make sure that our communities have access to critical government information
Mm.
in a language they understand. It's an issue of public health, the public safety, of basic civil rights, to make sure that that people have the information they need in a form they can understand. And so sort of this declaration takes us a step back. If agencies no longer have to provide this critical information in other languages, the public safety could be at risk.
Yeah, and Maura, thank you for bringing that up because I forgot to mention that really a key part of that executive order was the rescission of I believe it was Clinton's executive order in building language access into public services, and it hit just upon that. It I you know I've been a TESOLer my whole career, and I even actually started overseas. But I don't remember any incident, any case in which someone by crossing the border magically becomes proficient in English and has full access to everything. Perhaps it's out there in some obscure research journal, but I don't think that that's how it works. So having that component of making sure that whatever the home language is, whatever the language English proficiency is, that people have access to public services to be, being full participants, not, in the economy and society and having the access they need to function. This is vital. So thank you for highlighting that. I forgot to mention that. That's a really important point in it. Um, Carrie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm gonna borrow some words from the great state of Hawaii, which is where I first came as a new immigrant to the United States to study here in the US. I'm gonna say "Oamau ke ea ka'aina I ka pono." The life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness, and there's no righteousness in saying that there's just one way to speak. The United States has never been a monolingual place. There were languages here before the United States was thought of. And this monolingualism it's an erasure and it's a whitewashing of the history of the nation. So I think first of all that executive order is deliberately designed to erase our diversity, to make us forget where we come from, and to pretend to paint this false picture that we are a single monolithic monolingual nation, and we're simply just not. That is not who we are, and you cannot pretend that is who we are just by the fiat of an executive order. And I think the flip side of it is that it is also an unfunded mandate, right, Jeff? As you say, someone does not just come across a border and be able to, communicate in a language without having the resources to support them in doing that. And the executive order, I mean, the doublespeak in it really beggars belief. The language says that in welcoming new Americans, a policy of encouraging the learning and adopting of our national language will make the United States a shared home. But there is nothing that this administration has put forward to, in fact, support people in language learning. There's a Washington Post article from a couple of weeks ago that puts it really succinctly: Trump's policies on learning and speaking English are incomprehensible. So without even if you do believe that it is something that is necessary to welcome people, even if you do believe that having a single official language is necessary for the civic life of the nation, if you don't put resources towards the learning and teaching of that language, it's not about educating people or welcoming people or nurturing people. It's about punishing and erasing our diverse cultures in the United States.
Um, I want to just add one little quick thing before we move on to another point. I did put in a statement that TESOL put out in response to that EO and the English designation. I think it hits a lot of those points that you were talking about. But I also saw in the chat someone was asking about the violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, Title IV, Title VI, anyway, of the Civil Rights Act. That is of great concern because there was another EO. I hadn't even planned to talk about this, but I think it was about 3 weeks ago. There was another EO out following in line of the executive order. When I say EO, I just mean executive order. The EO that was put out against diversity, equity, inclusion, which has led to some of the funding cuts that we're seeing take place currently with some of the efforts in the Department of State, Department of Ed, well, all across agencies there. And one of that was a de-emphasis of the Civil Rights Act and the enforcement of that. And that, that did not get a lot of press. I was surprised by that. I think that is one that really is chilling if the federal government is de-emphasizing the civil rights protection, caught, in part of our law, not an executive order that can be changed every new administration, not a not a SCOTUS decision, Supreme Court decision that can be continuously challenged, but something that is shrined in law, which is much more difficult to change as part of that. So that was really very concerning, that EO with that came out recently. Now, I think, did I put the right? Hopefully, I put the right link into it to designate. Yeah, designating English as official language. Put the right one in there. A couple of other things, and then I see there's some questions on funding cuts, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to get to that. And well, actually, Sarah's just commenting here. So a few questions about adult education. Sarah, is there anything that we need to hone in on right now?
Yes, there's been such great discussions in the chat, and please keep chatting because we will be following up with resources and answer as much as possible. But a few people have asked about the current funding mechanism, right? That funding is supposed to start for adult education programs July 1st, 2025, and people still feel relatively uncertain about that funding, especially who might be eligible for receiving adult education programs. Of course, no one here has a crystal ball, but if anybody could shed light a little bit on what you think may happen in terms of providing adult education programming in the next fiscal year, including for English learning. And is there any interest in keeping that support there? I really appreciated Kira's comment that if you do want an English only society, then you also need to provide the literacy and education to support that, right? So we're seeing some kind of cognitive dissonance between those two things. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to hop in a little bit on this. So first of all, Congress in March finally passed funding that would carry through all of fiscal year 25, which ends September 30th of this year. And that essentially locked in funding at what was the previous year's level. So, $715 million plus for the adult education program at the Department of Education. And so that funding is there. And the administration is obligated to send that funding out to the states via the formula. Right now, we are in the process of developing the fiscal year 2026 budget. We've seen that the administration's skinny budget proposes zero for adult education, but the administration gets to propose a budget, Congress gets to write the budget. And so I think what's important right now to keep in mind is that your voices matter. As your members of Congress hear from their constituents that this is an important investment, an important program, the community needs it, that matters. we've had bipartisan support for adult education. As I mentioned, Senator Collins, who is also chair of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, is our co-chair of the Adult Literacy Caucus. Senator Todd Young of Indiana has done all kinds of work with us and generally signs our appropriations letter, which asks the Appropriations Committee to put adult education on a path to doubling. I think there is a lot of hope, but it takes a lot of work and speaking up and sharing why this is so important. I will just give you a little anecdote. You may have read early on, and somebody noted my Head Start, my Rhode Island Head Start poster that constituents gave us. It was reported that the administration was going to propose zeroing out Head Start, and that started a more intense wave of advocacy of people speaking up for Head Start, of why Head Start's been so important. And guess what? In Secretary Kennedy in these hearings about the department's budget has said, "Oh no, we're not going to eliminate Head Start. We're going to have Head Start." Now they may have some changes or things they want to do, but they went from $0 for the program to no, we're gonna keep it and fund it, and so your voices matter, and they'll matter here with adult education, and I feel confident that we can show the broad-based support needed to keep the program going.
Now, Maury, if I may, one question going back to the beginning, and I'm not clear on this, and perhaps someone who is an attendee on the call does. I would probably check with my state director of adult ed on this about what's been communicated to the states on that formula for fiscal year 25. Because when the continuing resolution was put forth, if I recall, there weren't any tables on that, so there wasn't a line item for Title II of AFLA. And they had, I think, a 40-day or 45-day period in which the agencies needed to report it. And that may has already gone out, maybe it hasn't, but I know that that's impactful now. I didn't know if you had heard anything or if that's something people should, go through their state director at NASDAQ for.
I would urge you to contact your state director, and I will do some investigating here. I know on the elementary and secondary education side, there's been a big delay in announcing the Title I allocations, and I think states just got their preliminary allocations recently. So that's something, and I can follow up on that, Jeff, for you.
Yeah, that would be good because I'm seeing in the chat that the several states are saying their state director has not heard anything yet. So I know that was because I believe the fiscal year on adult ed starts June. In a couple of weeks, around the
It's
corner.
probably like July 1st, like the
July
state.
1st.
Yeah.
Yeah, July 1st. Okay. One of those J months, not January. At least I didn't say January in that part of it. Um, and just with that, I want to reiterate how important the voice is in that process. There are a couple of ways in which, and I'm jumping ahead, but I think this is too important to wait till we get to the end here about your ability to take action. So I appreciate very much your example, Moya, in which people rose up about Head Start and the conversation shifted from no, we're getting rid of it to, oh yeah, it's still going to be there and we're fully funded, etc. If you look at the skinny budget, there's a lot of areas. I'll put that link in just a moment, in which there are concerns about the cuts for education across the board. And I believe Sarah put in there a link to COAB, the Voice for Adult Education. They have some current advocacy. There's a Dear Colleague letter for adult education overall. If you go to our advocacy, TESOL's advocacy action site, let me bring that up real quick. Make sure I have that.
We have
We have.
we have it in the chat. Yep.
Oh, you have it in the chat. All right. Thank you very much, Sarah. We have that. Ours is specific to ELT and English language learners. our English learners, and we're looking at both adult ed as well as in the pre-K through 12, another area in which the skinny budget seeks to eliminate funding completely. Um, and I'll just share this. I put this together based upon the skinny budget with some quotes from the skinny budget, so that everyone could get a little idea about what are some of the things that are being impacted in the skinny budget there. And I believe it, Kiera, I can't believe you said it, or Maura, you'd said it about what was in the skinny budget when it came to adult education. And I'll read this verbatim. It says K-12, K through 12 outcomes will improve as education returns to the states, which would make remedial education for adults less necessary. So many things wrong with that statement. So many things wrong with that statement. That again, it's like magic. You haven't returned. Returned. It's already in the hands of the states. But that doesn't magically mean that everyone's, all the boats are going to float. And then to call it remedial, I think is another, another really having that deficit approach in the language. It just indicates a lot in terms of the priorities and the values towards funding of education, adult education specifically. So that's just an image. I pulled that together of some of the different programs there if people are interested and would like to look into it. But two things that you can do to take action now: contact your member of Congress. I think COABE is circulating right now dear colleague letters. For matter of fact, Maury, I believe on the Senate side, who authored that one?
Yes, we have 23 senators right now on the letter, so we can always use more.
Always use more. Need more R's on this. Like you mentioned, it is bipartisan. I reached out to my representative today, who is an R. Hopefully, we can get some traction there. I've been trying to push that. Yes, some of them. Someone asked, "Are any of them R's?" Yes, on the Senate side, there are some R's. Senator Young has signed on in that, so please make sure you reach out on that. And then if you want to focus on funding, our site has it where you can just send it. It's an easy click through. You can send a letter to fund fund education. In this case, in this context, we're focusing on adult education, AFLA Title II, which again, I want to reiterate this. The president's skinny budget has proposed complete elimination of that. For the past 2 years, that has been level funded. So we're still operating off fiscal year 23. And when you look at the context of the need based upon the numbers not reaching, the need of the programs in place, the need of the metrics on what the data is showing, we're getting worse in this area. We need to do more. We need to make sure that we're having that accountability in there, and this is a vital piece of that process. So make your voice heard. And to give you some context, some people said, "Oh, the president is doing away with it." Well, the president has a budget that he proposes. The appropriation process is a months-long process, or sometimes, as we just witnessed, a year-long process. Fiscal year 25, took almost a whole year for. But the House and the Senate, the subcommittees are working on theirs. Well, the House right now, matter of fact, tomorrow at 10 a.m., they have one of their first hearings. The Labor, Health, Human Services, and Education Subcommittee on Appropriations is meeting at 10 a.m. Maybe someone can grab that link. If anybody wants at 10 a.m. wants to watch that subcommittee talk to Secretary McMahon, hopefully there'll be some information or discussion on adult education in that process, or in those hearings as well. But that takes place tomorrow, so it's in full season. The subcommittees have together, they put theirs, and then, ideally it will go to the full committees and then into the full floor at both the House and the Senate. Everyone agrees on it, and then it's signed into law by September 30th. So we have a functioning government. Reality is that if the past 2 years are any indication, we'll probably move into continuing resolutions for that. That's all to say, you use the president's skinny budget as motivation, but it is not the final budget. The motivation should be, as Maury was sharing in her example of a Head Start, the motivation for you to make your voice heard in that process. So sorry, I went off a little bit on that. I know we had appropriations a little bit later in this discussion, but wanted since it was hot topic there, wanted to make sure that that was at the top of the docket. And Karen, my apologies. Is there anything you would like to add? My apologies.
Follow up and chime in some on that question of the skinny budget, right? Because one of the flip sides to all of these cuts that we're seeing across the board in education is that some parts of the budget aren't skinny at all, right? It's not that this money isn't there. It's been allocated to other places. So something that this stands in really stark contrast to is a 13% increase in the defense budget. 175 billion for border security, which really is going to fund, you know, these ICE enforcement actions, which we're seeing are just having these negative impacts on our communities. We're seeing, I'm right here in Washington, D.C., $45 million being spent on a birthday parade for President Trump, right? So as you think about this skinny budget and as you communicate with your community and with the folks in Congress, as you make those calls, you know, be cognizant of the fact that this is not a cut in funding. This is a redistribution of education funds into other places, right? And so, I mean, I think that it's not that we can't afford this, it's that this skinny budget chooses not to fund it chooses not to fund education, it chooses to fund fear, right? And so, you know, I think all of us in the education world who work with immigrant communities have seen the impact of that fear. Jeff, you alluded to, you know, ICE actions across the nation. And just one that stands very close to my heart, and if folks would mention this in their calls, is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. When I was an adult ESL teacher right here in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, I taught construction workers. I taught union construction workers. He's a union sheet metal worker. So please mention his name as you make those calls as well, because he was a person that was snatched off the street away from his family without due process. And, you know, we're seeing that, we're seeing far too much of that. And we're seeing that having that real chilling effect on people who are our students and our neighbors.
Yeah, and I agree. I just had the opportunity to speak with the higher education community last week. And you've probably heard in the news, which, you know, has some residual effect, especially in the adult ed sector, in which you have international students that some reports were up around 4,000 international students. Their status was inexplicitly terminated. The schools didn't even know what was going on. And then even further, some of those more examples, you know, you got the ones in the headlines, but there's so many more that we don't hear about that are being picked up, and they have no idea why. There was one recently in the New York Times last week, an Iranian student who was, I believe, a doctoral student at the University of Alabama. In the end, the government, going through his hearings process, the government just said, well, we really don't have a case. But by that time, the judge said, well, you can either self-deport or you continue or enter into voluntary deportation, or you continue the hearing process. You know, and by that time, his will was zapped. You can read about that in the New York Times. So it's one thing to, and this I think falls again into advocacy, and I think two key important points whenever you are contacting a member of Congress is to have the numbers. It could be economic impact. It could be number of learners. It could be it could be data on the need of educators within your community or programs within your community. Economic impact of providing that, but there's also that human element, that story, that personal part. What is it that by going forward with legislation, with funding, will impact you in a personal, heartfelt way? It could be the story of your learner. It could be the story. It could be your own story about how that has aided, and the federal legislation, the federal funding has made that all possible. So, you know, two key things: your numbers and your story are so effective. And Maury, I'm saying this, and you're the source. Am I accurate? Am I missing something there? When you talk with your member of Congress, what are the important things to say?
Yes. So the data are important, but the connection to the constituents, how it really matters, real life examples from their state or their congressional district are the most compelling.
You used a word there, Moria, relationship. And I thank you that you use that. It's people will sometimes look at advocacy and think, well, I contacted, it's a one and done. No, it's if building a relationship with your office, whether it's in your district or it's in the in the Beltway, wherever that office is, building that relationship and putting yourself as a subject matter expert. Moria has the benefit. She's worked with TESOL, she's worked with English learners, but I've run into staffers all the time that have no background in that, and they're serving in education. But you have the opportunity in building that relationship to be the voice, help that office understand the context in that. So building that relationship is something that is continual. That you can be of value to the office in that process as well.
Right, Jeff, I would just add too, as your programs have activities or classrooms, you should not be shy about inviting your members of Congress or your congressional delegations to come and visit, see what you're doing. And you can invite their local staff. And sometimes we DC staff are lucky enough we get to travel to the home district and or home state and visit and meet with people and see programs on the ground. But show as well as tell.
Yeah.
That it really does make a difference. And um, generally speaking, the offices want to make those kinds of connections and get out there in the field and see what people are doing.
Thank you very much for that. We appreciate that. Well, I realize that we're coming up to the hour, and Sarah, can I confirm, are we going another half hour, or are we coming up to the hour? What?
I wish, honestly, there's so much here that we could continue talking about, but I just want to say thank you so much for this incredible conversation. We raised issues related to immigrant integration, to language learning, to the intersection between literacy and language, intergenerational, supporting parents and children. And something I always say about family literacy is it's not just parent to child, but also child to parent, which we see in so many of our immigrant families, where many of those students take on bigger roles, right, in helping their parents and families acclimate to the US. So I just want to say thank you to our incredible presenters. We know you are so busy right now. There are, communications flying all around. And we very much appreciate you taking the time to talk through this issue. There were so many resources dropped in this chat. We will absolutely be scouring the chat, saving the chat, sending out the video so you can access all of these important links as you move forward. And finally, as we wrap up the discussion, I just want to share that our next session is also related to supporting our English learning population. Again, 1 in 10 workers in the US ages 16 to 65 are English learners. This is a critical part of our community, of our country, and of course our economy. But English skills are workforce skills. We're going to be joined by incredible guest presenter, Dr. Katie Brown, who is the Chief Education Officer and founder of NGen. It's an online learning platform. Katie has worked with this community. She has, she's just incredibly knowledgeable about language acquisition, what's needed, how we can really support, people's learning to support their own lives and the lives of their families. So please continue to join us. We're going to keep having this conversation. This conversation is not over by any means. And thank you again to our incredible presenters and to Senator Reed for championing our libraries, our adult education programs, and everything. So thank you, Moira, and Jeff, and Kira.
And Sarah, if I may, if it's appropriate, can I put my contact information in the chat for everyone?
Sure.
Would that fine? Okay.
Absolutely. Or we can add it in the follow-up email.
Okay, yeah, because I'd love to hear from people. Share resources, anything that we could come alongside and help efforts there, and also just to magnify these stories. I know COABE as a great part in which they magnify the learner. We are working on our stories of educators and what they're doing in their context all across the globe. So love to hear from you. And just keep in touch. I put my email there. So thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon and keep on, advocating for adult education programs and for supporting all of our students, including our English or our multilingual learners of English, MLEs. All right,
Thank you all.
talk soon.
Thank you all. Thank you.